Something.
Hey, Rebecca, can you go let somebody in? I'm going to teach you how to do this for you. Okay. Because you're going to need that on Monday. Okay.
That's going in the
So, thank you all for coming tonight. Our guest tonight is Timothy J. Hykes. We are I'm really proud of this particular meetup because I kind of ran into Timothy virtually by way of his project 28 Black Designers, which he's done for I think 2 years now. And it's really brilliant, right? My feeling is that we tend to run in crowds with people we know, and we tend to know people who are just like us. And that means that white people usually hang out with white people, and women usually hang out with women, and men usually hang out with men. And when we recommend people for a job, we usually recommend somebody who's a lot like us. That's kind of a problem. It doesn't really create diversity. So what I love about Timothy's project is that he highlighted these amazing black designers from all over the country, I believe. And it was just a really stand-up project. And it got picked up by Adobe, which just speaks volumes about how awesome it is. So I don't know exactly what he's going to be talking about tonight. I gave him free rein. I think it's something about design and racism, and I think that's awesome. So without further ado, here's Timothy.
Hi everybody.
Hello.
This is crazy because I get up and I feel like I'm like really shy. And people are like, you're not shy. I get up, I am shy, but it calms down as I start to talk. And then you know it's really crazy. I start talking really fast. That means I'm getting really excited. Oh my God. And I'm like very excited to be here. So thank you all for coming out to hear me, little old me from St. Louis. And so basically this evening, how it's going to run, I'm first going to talk a little about me, some of my projects, working. I'm going to get in depth. I don't share that much information about my family and history, so I'm going to do that. So you're in for a special treat. And then I'm going to talk about what I'm currently talking about now. And so this presentation I'm doing, you're the first ones to see it. And I'm also going to be presenting the same presentation at the Design for Diversity Conference later on this year. So that's what I'll be doing on the main stage there. So without further ado, let me continue. So I am Tim Hykes. This is where you can find me on Twitter. Anybody that wants to tweet at me, I'm like tweeting all day at work. They tell me that I'm on my personal devices a little bit too much at work, but I'm like, I can't like ignore a tweet. I just love tweeting. And then this is a picture of me. So I am one of 6, born and raised here in St. Louis. And so St. Louis is my background. It's my hometown. It's where I'm from, where I get in a lot of trouble at. I live out in North County, so Florissant, Hazelwood, that's the area that I grew up. I went to the Hazelwood School District out there. I'm going to show you some pictures of my brothers. And so it's 6 of us, and I'm here right there. And I am the first one out of the 6 of us to go to college. Out of my family, the generation, I'm the first one to go to college. So I really like set the bar kind of high for my other brothers. Most of them didn't make it, but these 2 made it to college. So it's really great that I was able to be that stepping stone for my little brothers, and I'm really happy that they followed in my footsteps to get in college. I'm just really like talking, I got big feet, so I need to watch that. So I'm really happy that I was able to give them that opportunity. And so a lot of my work and the stuff that I do, I think about that legacy that I leave behind to them, and I think about the things that they're going through and facing as as black young men within our community. And change it to the right input, and I don't know how to change. There, that should do it. Okay, now if I watch my feet, we should be okay. Okay. So this is me when I was smaller. So these are the 4 that we're close to because my mother and father, they divorced. And so the oldest 3, they gave us the opportunity to choose which parent we wanted to go to. And of course, I'm a mom's boy, and I chose my mama. And so we're really close because of that choice. I mean, so close that I forced them all the time to take pictures and stuff like that. They hate me for it because they were frowning the first time, and I was like, no, like do some smiles. He was like, no, I'm not smiling. So that's Jonathan and that's Corey, and I do that with them all the time. A lot of people don't know that my first degree was in criminal justice. I went to Lincoln University of Missouri, which is an HBCU. I was in band, which is really crazy. And so a lot of people don't know that I play classical piano. I also play the baritone. That's me right there in that picture. And I really enjoyed it. And so while I was there at Lincoln University, I took advantage of everything. I was Student Government Association president. I was part of Kappa Kappa Psi National Honorary Band Fraternity, and then I also was a member of the, we call it LOVE. I don't know how I came up with that, but I think it was the initials LUVE from Lincoln University Vocal Ensemble, so the U, you know, within that, so I called it LOVE. After that, I found out about the design field. Well, first, if you could think to me like as a cop, that just didn't work, because when you call me to a fight, it's like, I ain't going, you said they were shooting, so where do you think I'm going? I'm not going to no fight. You can let me out this car right now because this is not going to happen. So that didn't work out for me. But I came back to St. Louis, and while I was trying to figure out, I stumbled into design. And I knew it was something that I wanted to do because while I was in college, at Lincoln University, I used to design a lot of flyers and different things like that. And I was wondering, how could I do this as a career, as a profession? So in St. Louis at the time, I was working at, this is Sears, and I was going through it because as you can see I was a little bit bigger, but I loved working with those people, and I ended up finding a path through AIGA. So I'm a big person within AIGA. This is a picture of AIGA, the national chapter. I just so happened to visit last week, and within AIGA, I continued my education. I started off at the St. Louis Community College at Florissant Valley. And I got my associate degree in graphic communications is what they call it. And I really enjoyed it because what happened was I found out that the teachers there, they had their degrees from like Yale and Princeton. And I'm just like, I'm getting a first class degree for the low. So that was really great for me to be able to save some money the second time around and get a good degree. And then after that, I went to UMSL. So this is the design students that graduated with me with UMSL. And UMSL taught me a lot of the foundational courses that became very crucial in my development as a designer. And it came very crucial into pushing my career. And so I graduated from UMSL, and still being a part of AIGA, I was able to weave that to be part of my success. And throughout those years, I got to do lots of fun stuff like go to the White House. And I'm one of those people, like if you ever see me go somewhere, I'm always making sure I'm in the front row somewhere. That's just my personality. But I got to go to the White House up under the Obama administration. I went there and I sat on all the furniture. So that was for the Tech and Innovation summit that they had at the White House. And so yeah, I definitely sat on all the furniture, and I was trying to sit as if Obama had called me, so this would be like, yes, Obama? And I really enjoyed that. So that really opened up a lot of doors, a lot of opportunities. I met designers from all around the world. So that takes us to work and how I got to where I am. So while I was in school, I had a couple internships. Let me see, I worked at, this is HLK, with the interns there at HLK. And I also worked at, let me think, I worked for Answers.com, but it was Announced Media that acquired Answers. And that's when I first got my little taste of what UX was. It was just web design, but we designed over 100 properties, and we were using these properties to test out traffic on the web. And that's where I really got that foundation. While I was at HLK, I'm sure everybody here has worked on Monsanto at some time in their life. If you're in St. Louis, you worked on Monsanto. After HLK, I ended up going to a local startup called Grovertown. So this is the only picture I could find. All the pictures I take, but these individuals, that's Victor, but these are the individuals. I think we were going to a photo shoot at Grovertown. And so Grovertown is a application, well, they're going to hate that I'm saying this, but it's Groupon basically for college students, and it's an app. And so I work with the business-to-business app, B2B, and that application basically helped get coupons on the applications. And so I designed the B2B app and also the website that went along with that. After that, I ended up at Launch Code. At Launch Code, I was a real character. And I really came into myself that allowed me to do a lot of things, that allowed me to travel. A lot of the work that I'm known for, it happened there where I probably should have been working, but I was doing that, such as the 28 Days of Black Designers Project. At Launch Code, I helped to build out their current website, helped to push them from 2 cities to 6 cities. I really helped Crystal a lot with the Coder Girl platform. And after Launch Code, from there I'm going to talk about projects, different projects that I'm known for, the ones that I like, the ones that I don't like. As everybody knows the 28 Days of Black Designers Project. So how that happened. 2 years ago, I was having a conversation with my friend Antoinette, and I was like, I really think we should do something to spotlight Black designers doing Black History Month. You know, and she questioned me, she was like, why Black History Month? I was like, well, it is an excellent promotional tool. You know, it's only 28 days, it's not gonna kill me, because you know, like I overwork all the time. And she was like, well, Tim, if you think it's something that will help the Black community, you should do it. And I told her, like, yeah, because I think the image of people and knowing that there are other people out there doing the same thing is very important. She's like, well, let's just do it and find out. And so, of course, it wasn't no let us do it, because I ended up doing everything, but I ended up finding out that people really, especially the Black community, really, we have Dee there, she's right there. The Black community really enjoyed the project. I was getting emails from people from smaller communities who were saying, Tim, I didn't know there were other Black designers out there. And I'm like, really? Well, now you know 28 of them. And then other organizations really liked the project too, such as Envision app, and they started sending out emails every day around the profiles. It was really big on social media, especially Twitter. I don't know, I just love the community on Twitter because they just tweet anything out. And the first time that I put it out there, I said I was doing this project, and I sent out a post with a little image, you know, showing 28 Days of Black Designers, and I went to bed. The next day, it had like 200-something likes, you know, 100-something reshares. I was like, oh my God, I'm really gonna have to do this all 28 days. And I was just thinking, I could just put up a couple profiles and maybe miss a couple days so I'm busy and then come back, but it ended up me turning into me doing something every single day. So this is the project that I'm most known for. The second lesser known project that happened during the Charleston issue is We Stand Together. And this site came because I really didn't like the idea of people basically saying that, you know, we should be the only ones here. We want to kick all these other people out of our country. And I thought that at that time, it was hard for me to have a voice in that area to sit there and stand with them. So I created an online platform that allowed designers to voice exactly how they feel. And they started creating images, we posted them up on the site, and we started sharing these images throughout social media to say that we stand together against hate. You know, we don't like this stuff that's going on in Charleston, we need to cut this out. We're in the United States, let's come together, because we're a lot better than this. So that happened, it got a lot of attention, people loved that, but the next biggest project is, that I'm really proud of, is the Design Plus Diversity Conference. So, the Design Plus Diversity Conference is my senior thesis. My senior thesis was Design Plus Diversity and how we can make our design community more diverse. And I gave over 126 ways on how to do that. And with that, at AMSU, my teacher's like, Tim, you talk a lot. You have a really big mouth, you talk a lot. This is one thing we want you to really put in action and do something behind. And I'm like, okay. So, my friend Antoinette at the time, she was president of AIGA, and I was vice president. And I was like, well, I want to do this conference. And she was like, well, Tim, if you do all the work, we could have the conference. Like, you're like very talented. Yeah, you starting to get the thing with it. Very talented, you know, you're very creative, and I really think that you could really create something that would be beneficial to our community, especially with the things that were going around at the time. So I did that. And just to give you a little backstory, like, we didn't have anybody sign up for the conference until the very last moment. So I was going crazy, like, I think we need to cancel the conference. Oh my God, nobody signed up. And after I was like, Tim, calm down. She's like, I'll wait till the day before to sign up for the conference. I was like, you do? She's like, calm down, Tim. And I'm just, oh my God, nobody signed up. We don't have no money. I don't know how we're gonna bring these speakers in. We're gonna be in a deficit. But it was like the last week, we had like 60-something people sign up for the conference. So I was very excited about that. We had some really excellent speakers to come out. It was very small and local. But what happened the next year is we had more people to sign up, but the speaker were like out of this world phenomenal. Look, I'm picking on Dee because Dee also spoke too. So she got to see the personalities of the speakers behind the scene, but also you got to actually be up and close with the speakers. So with this conference, I like for it to be more of my personality. I like for it to be very open, very energetic, very exciting. I want it to be like different people engaging. Towards the end of the conference, people didn't want to go home. Like we literally had to kick people out of the space because all they wanted to do was sit and talk about how we can make this better, how we can expand this, you know, and they started calling it a movement. I'm like, a movement? This sounds like work. But it went really well. So well that this year, Adobe sponsored the conference at like the highest paid price for it. So they're like the presenter sponsor for the conference. Twitter came on board. After Twitter, we had Microsoft come on board, and they're all interested in making the design community more diverse. And so that's the backstory with me. And now this next one is basically what I'm going. So this year I am presenting at the Design Plus Diversity Conference. Normally I'm up there speaking, introducing speakers, but I am going to actually get up and speak. And what I'm going to speak about is actually what I'm going to talk to you today. So you're going to be the first ones to see this. You're going to get the guinea pigs. Yeah, you're the guinea pigs, yes. So if I'm a little nervous, that's because I've never done it before. So I've been practicing. I'm like, oh my God, I hope this is good. But I think it's going to be very educational. And so I'm talking about the community and how we got to this place, how we're screaming for diversity, and how some of the things that our government designed put us in this current situation. So let's dive directly in, and I hope my glasses don't fail me. So people of color and white suburbs are by design. It was designed to how we live today, how they are segregated in different areas, how the highway runs through certain areas, and just basically destroy communities. This is designed. And it's the result of federal policy that still affects us today. Now that creates a high level, because most people say that, oh, well, I didn't have nothing to do, and my parents worked really hard. Well, you're right, but there's another high level. Our federal government created these policies, and they definitely supported it along with other individuals in the communities who are also doing damaging things to our community. So let's start with the first area of interest, which is the New Deal. So FDR created the loan program to help Americans finance their homes, and this came out to be the New Deal. Part of that New Deal was the financial reform regulation, and it helped to reform Wall Street and the farmers and unemployment and Social Security and different things like that. So this is very important and very crucial start to how we got to this area, because the New Deal led to how people got these loans, because the federal government basically spelled out how these loans were to be distributed. So to decide who got these loans, the government created a color-coded map in which green neighborhoods were good and red neighborhoods were bad. This is what we call redlining. If you lived in a green neighborhood, it was super easy to get a loan. And if you lived in the red areas, most likely you were not approved for a loan. This was not fair, and the red areas suffered. So I have a question for you. Do you know why some of the areas were designed as red? Those areas were the African American communities and the minority communities who lived there. Of course I gotta be a little like, wait, what? Yeah. Those areas were African American communities, Latino communities that were redlined. They were not able to get loans as easy as the green areas. And so redlining is it systematically prevented us from getting home loans. Now you may not think this was a big deal, and you're probably asking how come the minorities didn't just move to the green areas? Well, that didn't happen because William Levitt and other suburban developers made explicit rules in racist policy around who got to live in these areas. So Levitt had in their standard lease clause 25 in 1949, and it stated that homes could not be used or occupied by any person other than members of the Caucasian race, literally putting in writing in their practices and policies that only white people could be in these areas. You can check the documentation on Google. I always suggest people to do research in Google Papers because it allows you to research all of the newspapers within the United States and just basically Google Levittown. I have a couple of sites down here where I got my information. One is from the University of Chicago, and then the other is the New York Times. In 1997, they wrote an article on Levittown and the legacy of Hykes. And what's really crazy is that the developers wanted to exclude the rights, but also our government encouraged developers to discriminate. The result of the policies is that from 1933 through 1968, a whopping 98% of the home loans were given to white families. I know this is like a bad representation because I'm saying it like, but but yeah, that happened, like 98%. That is like really big throughout that time, from 1933 to 1968. And what makes this really worse is people think, oh, that just happened, but no, these stack on top of each other. These are compounded. And the families in the green or white neighborhoods were able to purchase homes and accrue wealth. And people in the red neighborhoods, they were not able to take advantage of those opportunities. So in the green neighborhoods, the influx of wealth attracted new businesses, and credit bureaus sent out reports each year for incomes and zip codes. So basically what happens is they attracted the wealth because they were building and it compounded. And how that works with organizations and businesses, me working at Wells Fargo, is credit bureaus are able to look at these different areas and they can see the minimum or the amount of wealth within the zip code. An organization can come in and look at the wealth that's within the zip code and decide between this year and last year, there was a huge influx. And they can also compare that with the people who've signed up for credit cards and for the different businesses and say that we now know in this zip code, we have like 98 of the people in this zip code who shop with us. So now we can put a store here in this zip code because we know that they're going to come directly to it, especially depending on how close the other store is in other zip codes. So that's how they figure out how to, well, on a small level, how to put a store or a business somewhere. And it's basically based on wealth. Like, come on, change. So this caused the property values to go up in those areas. So in the green areas, the property values went up. Businesses was going there, people were making more wealth, which also meant that families could sell their home and send their kids to colleges and pass down the wealth and advantages to future generations. And that is a huge key to how this happens. So this is going to be a cycle that continues, and people are able to pass this off and go to other green areas throughout the United States. Meanwhile, the red neighborhood has far less abilities to build wealth and remain tapped into property. Oh shit. Like speed. That's why laws that were eventually passed down made most of, that's why laws were eventually passed that made most of the discretionary practices illegal. So you think this is a good thing. We're now trying to create stuff to stop most of this discrimination that's happening. But without wealth, families in the red neighborhoods couldn't afford to move up, keeping these communities separated by race. So it was already too late by the time they came to put these policies in place to try to correct the stuff they did in the past. Because these communities have already developed these wealths and it's already started to being passed down from generation to generation. What people fail to see is that most colleges have feeder communities. And in these communities, they like go directly to them, to the schools and high schools, and they like present to the students all the time, and they feed them, and they're able to get into like some of the top schools like Yale. Yes, Yale does have a feeder community right here in St. Louis, in which they go and they recruit students directly from that. And these communities are not the communities of wealth. Today, 70 years after Levittown was created, it's still less than 1% black. And this is the effect of Levitt's racism, and it still lives on. And if our neighborhoods are segregated, that means the schools are too. There is more segregation in our school now than it was in 1970. And most people have a time of picturing that because they think, oh, you know, people can live anywhere. Well, that's actually not the truth because property values and the cost of housing stops people from being able to live anywhere. You know, it's easier now for people to work to accrue that wealth because they don't have as many barriers, but there's still that generational wealth that most people have to make it easier for them to go from one community to the next. So, as we all know, schools are largely funded by property taxes. And since property values in these green areas or white neighborhoods are so much higher than the schools that get money, these schools get to spend more money on their facilities, their teachers, and supplies because these property taxes are so high. So they have more money in the community to spend on these things to make it better. On the other hand, in the Black or Latino schools, they are massively underfunded, and they are less likely to have AP and science courses and math courses, and they're less likely to have experienced qualified teachers, basically based on property taxes in these areas. These schools are falling apart. And we hear that every day on the news. We hear about the different test scores and how schools are rated. You know, and we can probably name some right here in the St. Louis community. Go back. Why did you do that? So the truth is that our children are going to be segregated by the schools that they go to. And this is a direct result of decades of redlining policies enacted by our own government to build our suburbs. And highways were built for the suburbs, and most often they run right through these red areas, destroying them. So if you think about it, you can see some highways where the streets are like connected, like the name of the street is on this side of the highway and the name of the street on this side of the highway, but the highway runs through and it no longer connects. Like we can see evidence of that today where highways just ran right through communities and basically it just destroyed some of the communities. And this didn't just happen in the past, but today banks are still charging higher rates on loans to people of color today, even when they have the same credit scores. And one thing to look into, so Massachusetts, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, they actually have a organization, a nonprofit organization that actually monitors the different loans that people get. And out of the 100, actually like 368 counties, only 87 of those banks in Massachusetts out of 368 gave loans to people of color.
What's the population dispute in Massachusetts?
I don't know. I didn't look that far because I'm more interested in the number of banks, but that's probably something I need to add to show the difference.
That, you know, depending on where you are, the ratio is going to be, ethnicity ratio is going to be different. Like
right.
in St. Louis, it's like 48, 52 or something.
But you would still think you would have at least one person of color getting a loan in that community, even if they're disproportionate to not have any speaks volumes.
I mean, yeah, I agree with you. I'm just, you know,
Yeah.
there are some places you go and, you know, that's what the ratio is.
But if in the whole county is what I'm saying, though, if there's not one.
So let's save some discussion at the end, because I left some little area at the end for us just to discuss and talk about these things. And I'm almost finished. So Black and Latino home buyers still experience over 4 million illegal housing discrimination practices every year. And this came from Nicole Hannah from the Jones from the ProPublica to October 28, 2012. And in that article, she talks about the illegal housing issues that are faced against the different communities of color. And so, yes, you did work hard, your parents worked hard, but America gave other communities a leg up based on these housing practices. And one quote always stands out to me. Dr. Martin Luther King said that the Black community is the only community that was ever enslaved on American soil. And we're always told to pull up your bootstraps, you know, and get out there and work. But the problem is, at that current time, America was expanding into the West. And at any time, America could have said, you know, they could give some land or gave some opportunities to people of color, but they didn't. That opportunity, when they're expanding and giving that land away, wasn't for people of color. You know, so it's hard to tell somebody to pull up their bootstraps when they don't have a foundation in which they could do that. And so that's part of the bigger argument with like the foundation that was given out to certain communities and other communities. But our suburban areas are built on the foundation of segregation. And we can't close our eyes to that. And so pretty much today I wanted to present this presentation just to create that foundation to give people some education to talk about these issues. Because what happens is we get out in these communities, we're having these in-depth conversations, and we don't know where certain things happen or started. We don't know that the developers in these areas were basically saying that no black people or people of color could move in these houses that created. We don't know that the federal government was supporting them in those different policies and different things. And so just creating some opportunities where people can bring knowledge that actually bring light to the situation. Now think about when people are going out and talking to people like Vince Seguro. Like he brings very detailed information, he brings facts and figures, and to me he talks about the black community really bad. He always talked about that, oh well, the black community is destroying, our community, and they're killing each other. That's right, but if you look at any of the facts and figures, most communities are the ones that kill themselves, because of domestic violence that happen. People argue with people that they know, and it's just, I hate to say this is the way of life, but it's just things that currently happen. So I just want people to have a foundation to start these conversations, and I really, in some cases, wanted to make people mad, because then it gives the opportunity where people can see their privilege can benefit others. An excellent example is what happened at Starbucks, where the guys went in and were waiting for someone. They didn't buy anything, but you had someone who were able to say they were just sitting there just like the rest of us, and we didn't buy anything. And if that young lady wouldn't have recorded it, and the young man and lady that was defending them didn't step up, it would totally look like it was just one-sided, and they were in there being disruptive. But as we've come to know that everybody that was sitting there, they were waiting for someone, and maybe after that person got there, they might have purchased something from Starbucks. So it definitely opens up the chain of communication, open up the line for people to start having discussion, and I just want people to be aware of these things. There's nothing that any person did wrong. Our federal government definitely allowed these things to happen, and in most cases put some of these things into power to where we got today. So this is why you roll through some suburban areas and it's all white. It was all by design. And I think about how can I use UX design to undesign some of this, or to change the way that people think, so that they wouldn't be so uptight about, black person moving in, oh, now the whole neighborhood is going to hell. Because that's what we hear on our side. When someone moves in, or a person of color moves into a neighborhood, instantly the property value of the house is supposed to drop. So that's it for my presentation. I think this gives us a lot of stuff to talk about if we want to have some dialogue or some conversations or some questions around this. If you want to question me on some themes and some of the figures and stuff that I point out, or if you even just want to know more about the different things that I use to base my argument on. So, yes?
Who has questions? Who wants to go first?
Oh, did you say Alicia?
Alicia.
You, girl. Oh, okay. Starting with where you left off, I found your quote very interesting. How can I use UX design to undesign some of this? Can you explain what it means to undesign?
Well, everything is design, and basically you use design as a tool to create other. When I say undesign, basically you think of redesign, to redesign things that are better for our current situation. I like to think that we grow as a community. We change our mind. In fact, President Obama, when he first got in office, was not for gay marriage, but we all know that as soon as someone changed his mind and he supported gay marriage. So I like to think that we all are able to change our mind, and we all have the opportunity to show people and individuals that the way things that happen, just because they happen and you just go along with it, you have the opportunity to use whatever resources are available to you to change that situation. One good way is to show people how being an ally works. So when I talk about Starbucks, designing people to be allies is a very excellent way. When it comes to women's rights, I'm a man, so me walking in the room talking about women's rights is not going to help the argument. But me being in the room, helps a lot. Sometimes if it takes me, taking me to shut up, that helps a whole lot in most situations, because I'm not currently faced with the issue. I can't really talk about what they're going through. but I can be there to show support and recognize it when these things happen in the office, and I can be that ally to say, oh no, D was actually the one that thought of that, and how about we bring D in to talk about that, because I heard this idea from her 3 months ago, and I'm happy that you brought that to the table. Let's bring D in. That's me being an ally and now giving D a platform in which she could probably be, VP one day in office. Yeah, but yeah, these are different things that I think about. So allyship is one. We can talk more later about some other ideas that I have where we can try to just use conversational skills to try to change the narrative and show that these things were designed and how we can undesign them in our community.
All right. Hey, Tim.
Hey, D.
Yeah, I'm D. So currently, I'm a designer on a team that's working on the redevelopment and visioning of the Shoto Greenway design that was stretched from Forest Park to the Arch. And 2 questions, because of that, I have 2 questions for you. One, could you speak more towards local context of how you've seen and understood these issues of like race in urban planning and design playing out? And so that's the first question. The second is that for communities that have been displaced and or erased by things that have been designed, what could be a role of designers right now to either honor those histories, honor those communities that are no longer there? And I think about that in terms of the development that's happening in Brentwood by like the Walmart and Sam's Club, but also in Mill Creek Valley in downtown where there used to be like a Chinatown garment district. All of these places, as well as the NGA site as well.
I'm going to answer that question first because the first question I don't remember.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was a long question.
So basically, how can we honor or design these communities now? What can we do? My mind thinks of number one, spreading that information, and we can do that through like marketing campaigns. And I give you an excellent example. There was this guy and his girlfriend. He created this car commercial for like a 1996 used Buick. But it was so revolutionary that all these sites were posting it because he did it like it was like a new car. Like he said, this car is not for the, basically they were trying to sell the car. And basically the message in the video was this car is not for the individual who's looking for style and grace. This car is for the individual who's looking to, for the mileage, to get more of the experience. And it was such a big thing and it moved me because it was something simple. And it was a video that explained the story of this car. And like within it, like she had put in like a coffee pot. And she was making coffee on the way to work. She was getting dressed in the car on the way to work. And it pretty much made the car part of her family. And I think about different things like that because we can tell the story around these different areas. We can explain what redlining is. If you put a red line map today on top of a current St. Louis city map and go to those areas, most of the time you'll either see that the houses are not there,
Right.
or you'll see that they're currently run down. And so, if we're able to show that these policies from the past, created these neighborhoods today, that would open a lot of eyes because a lot of people don't know. The narrative that we continue to get is my family worked really hard to get, where I am, and so you can't come and tell me or talk about privilege or say that I had a leg up. When honestly, you did have a leg up because the government actually put that in place in trying to build up the suburban areas. And so that's like the first thing. If it was me and someone told me, Tim, we need you to do something, I would make a campaign, personal campaign with videos that explain the areas that would, the issues that would be in between 30 seconds to a minute quickly and like use a lot of video and jump shots to show exactly what happened and how we got here. That's what I would do. So your first question was on, yeah, I'm definitely going to need you to repeat that.
If you could speak to local context of how urban planning, urban design have affected or have been affected by race here.
So let's take our current, so we all know about these different malls that popped up, especially the 2 outlet malls that popped up right together. So we know in North County there used to be Jamestown Mall. It was a pretty mixed area, but people started moving out, especially with the issues that happened around Spanish Lake, where we had developers basically saying that black people are moving into Spanish Lake. You want to sell your house now and move out because the property values are going to go down. And they basically created like this emergency where people moved out of North County quickly in that Spanish Lake area. And when they moved out, they took the wealth with them. The people who were getting better jobs, people of color who were getting better jobs, moving into the area, were basically lost that wealth. And in doing so, Jamestown Mall was destroyed. And so if you go to Jamestown Mall now, it's nothing. I mean, you at least could go to the movie theater in the area, but you can't. It's no longer there, you know, and it was very prominent. It's part of the history of St. Louis, especially North St. Louis. And that is an example of, you know, wealth moving out of the area to somewhere else. And where that wealth moved out is in that Chesterfield area. And so those stores also moved out there. And it was so devastating that it also started to devastate the new mall, which is the Mills, around the recession time. And so they built these new malls. The wealth was out there. They were able to see that more people were moving out into this area in Chesterfield, and they developed that area. And it became something to talk about because now we had two outlet malls right next to each other. We had the, what I call the Dog Mall, and we had the Premium Outlet Mall. And most of those stores were from, Dog Mall's nice too, but most of those stores, you know, came from Jamestown Mall and the Mills Mall. And those communities now are like big black communities, and they're suffering. They no longer have that wealth. They no longer have like a shopping mall to go to, and now they're taking that wealth out into that area because that's where, you know, the source they wanted to go to. And so that is an example of practices today, locally, that are happening. And that's not pretty much redlining, but that's basically a scare that happened. I don't know if that answered your question. I might have just been rambling knowing me. Yeah, Northwest Plaza, but also with Northwest Plaza, that area, they did start to redevelop that area, and so it does look nicer now, but that mall is gone too, you know. And so if you look at where all the malls are, none of the malls are in black areas anymore. I mean, we even had the mall that was downtown St. Louis, and you would think that mall, you know, would have lasted with tourism and everything. It didn't last, and that went before the recession.
Questions from anybody else?
No more questions? Do I go with Scott Street?
I have something.
Hi. So I am a St. Louis native, but I've lived in Boston for the past 8 years, and I'm back in St. Louis. And being on the East Coast, seeing the communities that are international and mixed, diverse in ways that we can't even imagine in St. Louis. Like, there's people from all over the world and huge numbers on the East Coast and on the West Coast. And to come to St. Louis and still see that there's this division between white and black here is really sad. And I'm really happy that you brought some of the history into context here today and the urban planning. And it also brings to mind, what can we do as UX designers to build anti-racism design? How can, like, some of the platforms that you use to show unity after Charleston, what can we do in the St. Louis area to make it so that we are coming together from all ethnicities to say that we are united and we are going to build St. Louis up and make it a better city?
I can give you an excellent example of UX design and what they did with the city. So in Michigan, they grabbed a group of UX designers and they had them to research and figure out why Michigan was not growing. And so with that, they went to all these other bigger cities that like had development through the roof that were like growing really fast, such as Atlanta. If you've ever been down in Atlanta, there's something building on every corner. In New York, even as crowded as it is, you look at the skyline, they're having new buildings that are being built in New York. In Chicago, there's so much that's being built. And so what they found out is that these communities are embracing diversity. It's not just the people in the communities, their government is embracing diversity, and know diversity is a key in growing the city. And here in St. Louis, we move around. And this is me talking from my own experience. I have no data around this, but from living here so many years, what I start to see is when a certain group of people start to move to another neighborhood where there's another group of people, they move away from them. And I've even found that like neighbors are ended up becoming neighbors again, moving away from other groups of people.
The boomerang.
Yeah, like that's like crazy. Like they talk to each other, and they're like, oh, you know, I moved out to North County. So we had all of the large part of the black community, you know, were able to get better jobs, educate themselves, make a better living for their children. They moved to North County, and a lot of them end up becoming neighbors and all. Like in my own experience, there's people that I went to in the Normandy School District, which was right in North City when I was a kid, and we moved out to the Hazelwood School District, and some of them ended up being my same friends and like being neighbors, and that was like crazy for that happen, for that move. And so that happens a lot here in St. Louis. So I think when first our government first decides that we need to sit down and have a conversation and say that we're going to be a city that embraces diversity and start putting things in actions, but also what we can do as UX designers is actually bring the research to show that these larger cities are always growing and steady growing because people are not afraid. People are embracing each other. I mean, I've never seen so many different cultures in my life in New York, so many different things. To be on the subway and hear 4 different languages speak at one time, and see one person speaking 3 different languages, having 3 different conversations. That doesn't happen here in St. Louis. I might get French. Yeah. I might get French every now and then. I might be able to go and talk to somebody. Est-ce que vous comprenez le français? We know, like something, but that doesn't happen here. But in other cultures, you know, that happens. In other cities, that happen. I think, like, we can actually just.
I went to Rolla and I was literally the only American in my graduating class. Because they were all Indian, Chinese, and Arabic.
Yeah.
So that happened all the time. Multiple languages.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, it's a lot that we can do here, and it doesn't have to be one of those things where you rate somebody. You should never rate for somebody. If you have a good idea and you can put some stuff together, the mayor will meet with anybody. She will. You know, you just set up a meeting. What day? Because I see you like, oh my God, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yes, there are efforts that are happening in the region. Last night there was the launch party for STL 2039. The mayor, the 4th Ferguson, and part of it is that like the conversation is switching from diversity and inclusion to really look at racial equity in the region, especially with the work that came from like the Ferguson Commission and Better Together, Ready by 21, all of these efforts that were segmented in their own silos, really joining together to say, like, here's how we can put forth all of these values that we know will give our city progress. And as much as people have their own challenges with the mayor, like she was there last night, the city has signed on. The deputy mayor, Nicole Hudson, was the manager for the commission, and she's now leading a lot of those efforts with and St. Louis now has a chief resilience officer to ensure that a lot of these efforts take legs. Like that it's not just reports, but like there's action and traction.
That's great. And you find that a lot of these diverse people from the communities are right there having these conversations with them.
Yeah, so have you had any conversations with the mayor, or what next steps can we take to be allies? Or, you know, because I actually live in a neighborhood where I hear Bosnian all the time, I hear Somalian all the time, I hear Spanish all the time. Far South City, near Holly Hills. I live in between, I think it's called Dutchtown and Holly Hills. I live right in that corridor, and I see and love it, right? And I'm going to my neighbors and saying, welcome. I have a lot of, you know, there are Vietnamese neighbors. We have, but I know that we're this little anomalous pocket. So what can we do to be more transparent? Are there things we can do? Is there a next step? Let's have a meeting with the mayor. How can we use design? How can we build an app to make the city more transparent? What are some tactical things you think we can do?
I think that's like the ultimate question. I don't have it. Like, I'm being completely answered. I don't have an answer or a solution, because if I did, you'd probably see my name in lights again for bringing the answer or solution to St. Louis. But nothing hurts a failure but a try. I say all the time to my mentees, reach out to people, you know, reach out to the mayor's office. You see Dee here is very knowledgeable, you know, and she's like, oh my God, Tim, don't put me in this. Very knowledgeable. But I know you do, Dee does a lot of social justice work in the community. I'm more with the design side because I'm president of AIGA, and I work more primarily with the design community a lot more and create issues, especially within diversity and inclusion on a national level. So I definitely don't know or have the answer or have the right person to talk to, but I am one where we can come together and I could like look at some things and we can find out like what's currently happening and who wants to be more involved. I mean, this meetup was created by an individual. It could be another meetup to do the same thing.
You know, on that note, I would love to see, I see a lot of new faces here tonight, and I would love to see y'all at more of the STLX meetups, because like I said in the intro, I know a lot of white people, and I end up recommending white people for jobs. That doesn't create diversity. You know, I need to know you all. I need to know you all, and I need to know your work. I need to get to know you as people, and you know, everybody in this room needs to get to know everybody else in this room so that we can, you know, tear it down just naturally by recommending people that we know who happen to be women, who happen to be people of color, who happen to be, you know, men, in my case, I guess, because I'm a woman, right? So we need to get to know the other. That's one of the ways we can design our way out of this.
I also want to know if there's anybody out there like who like disagrees with something I said, that we can have a conversation. Because part of this is like me learning too, and I like to talk to people who think differently, who think, you know, who disagrees with me, because that allows me to learn. That allows me to go back and check up on them, and allows them to go back and check up on me. So was there anything that I said tonight that like you disagree with or, you know, challenge? Yes.
It's more of a research note.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to the Taubman outlets and the Prestige outlets, and I can't remember which one is farther, but the one that's farther away from the arch was the one that was built second. And what I had heard was that strategically and I think it's Prestige came second. Was it Prestige that came second? But I had heard that the one that was built second is actually a marketing strategy that has been in action for a long time, where they see where Prestige goes or Taubman goes, and then they build close in that area, and because they have connections with bigger brands, that their marketing or their they can fill their malls better, and so they kind of come in as secondarily and take the money out of the sales of the former that comes in and does all the research to find out if this is a good place to go. So the concern is the research that you've discovered racially based, or is it a marketing strategy that we see enacted period space?
To give more context to what you're talking about, so Prestige is basically the mall group that owns like these different malls, and she's asking me, you know, on the research that I've done, you know, was it a marketing type based thing, or was it, you know, basically focused on race, right?
Right.
Yeah. So what I have, so when I started talking about the different area codes and things, so that information came from Wells Fargo, because Wells Fargo each year goes and pulls the information for each zip code, and they're able to see the dollar amount, because the credit bureaus won't give us anything else but the dollar amount in those zip codes, and so they're able to see what type of wealth they own in that zip code and how much of it, how much of it is within our organization. And so with that, malls and stores are able to do the same thing. Express is able to go out to look and see how much money is in different zip codes, and they can look at their people who have credit cards and where these credit cards are in these zip codes and how much of that they, you know, accrue or have within that. So basically it's not really, I would probably say maybe it's a little both. Is that the proper answer? Because I really wasn't thinking about wealth when I made the figure, you know, and made the comment. I was thinking more of like the money and following the money and being in the area where the wealth is and being able to capture that benefits that organization. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I'll bring it over.
So I think to the point there, it may not have been explicitly racially motivated, right? But I mean, based on, you know, what you talked about early on, it is definitely a result of racism, right? I mean, that compounding factor of everything coming through, right? So the people at Taubman, the people at Prestige, Taubman is the dog mall for those who don't know, because you can take your dogs there and walk around. But anyway, so they made a business decision, I would imagine, whether it's a marketing ploy or whatever. They made a business decision based on the data that said, this is where the money is, so this is where we're going. And they don't really probably care why the money is there. They just care that that's where the money is, and the money isn't over at the mills anymore. When I moved back here in 2005, the mills was, still booming. I mean, we went out there and, rode the go-karts and, all those things, and then, 2009, 2010, holy crap, what happened out here? So I think that it was probably not explicit, deliberate racism. I mean, I can't speak for them, but I think it's just a result of all of this. And I think just to comment on that research and that history, there's a book from last year called The Color of Law. I don't know if you've read it, but I mean, it basically... Was he? I heard an interview with him on NPR, I think, a couple of, whenever I heard it, but I heard it, last year when the book first came out. But it basically is a book-length discussion of federal housing policy and enforced segregation that you talk about that basically got us to where we're at.
Thank you. Yeah. And in most cases, people are just following the money. They really don't care who has it. To give you an example, in Atlanta, the communities of color make up more than 30% of the population. So with that, they have malls in just about every little nick and cranny. There's a huge mall, right there in Baghead, and then like if you go down to like some of the black communities down like in College Park in that area, they have a mall too because there's money there too. So it just really depends, who wants what in what area. And I don't really think they were like thinking race. I really think it was like we want the money, and where can we be to ensure that we're successful.
But if I could respond to that, like the notion that many developers, companies follow the money, that still is a construct of racism in exerting a total disregard for people, especially people who may not directly benefit you, especially along the lines of race. And so capitalism and racism, of course, plays hand in hand, especially in terms of urban policy, urban planning, urban design.
Doesn't it change how you attack the design?
Well,
or at least the design problem from a human-centered situation. If the problem is racism, that's a different design problem than if the problem is monetary, or that your subjects don't have the finances to do X, Y, or Z.
Yeah, it does. I mean, within design, we're taught that no one solution is like the best. You have better solutions than others, and no one solution is going to be the ultimate solver of all times. Our communities change, people change, the way that they think change, and so therefore these solutions, fall at the wayside. You have to create another one. And so I mean, it's going to be a multitude of different solutions to help our community solve this, because it's not just the money. It's not just people focusing on the color of the skin. It's not just the dialogue and conversation. It's not just the policies that are in place. There are so many things that are stacked on each other, and we really would have to decide, what would be the most important thing to tackle first that would help us to trickle down to some of these others. So, yeah, it's not going to just be one solution. One solution does not fit all in this particular case.
And even if you are following the money as a marketer, that cumulative effect of being denied opportunity is going to be the invisible barrier. That right?
Yes.
Okay.
Ashford? Yeah, go ahead.
So you were talking about these very discriminatory laws, the Levittown Standard Lease Law. How can design actually inform the audience about changing outdated laws and updating it to really support the community?
In my mind, I think storytelling would be like the best tool and avenue, because I mean we still have laws on the books that state that like I'm like 1/5 of a vote. So what if someone decided that we want to enact this and like start enforcing that? Like what happens then? So I think storytelling, to show like what happens, what type of effect would happen. Give an excellent idea. So it was National Geographic. 10 years before Katrina, they wrote an article. It may not have been 10 years. I might be making stuff up. I do that a lot. But National Geographic wrote an article about Katrina years before it happened. And they really went into details about the levee breaking, about the different things that are going to happen, and said this is going to happen. They did that through storytelling. And like if we would have like paid attention to that and thought that was real and just not like simple storytelling, like we could have really took care of that down in Louisiana before it happened. And I think about that same principle, like us showing the effect if a lot of these laws that are in these books, like what happens if, people in power decide that they want to start to enforce them. Like we could look at the current president and like what if one day he just wakes up and like, I want to start to enforce that, and like what type of America would we happen then? Would we truly be the Handmaid's Tale? Or, with something else, people know what that is. Or, would it be something else? But it would be devastating. Like, there's laws in the books in Chicago that says no drying towels on parking lots. Like, I can't even imagine why people are drying towels on parking lots, but they're there. No one has been and changed them and overrode them or anything. So I think storytelling, in my idea, would be the best way to show, number one, that these things are still out there. Number two, what happens when someone decides to enforce them. And then number three, what it does to everybody in the community. Something small that we can talk about is they have laws on the books that, well, maybe this is not a good example, but they have laws on the books that, no, it's not a good example. I'm not going to give it. It's not a good example at all. I just went through it and I did a little storytelling for myself and found out that that's not a good example. But yeah, that's what I think of. Like, storytelling is an excellent tool that we have as designers, and it's a way that we can use live footage or illustration to show like these different things, and just to make people more aware. Outside of storytelling, like we can actually do research with like maybe statistics to show, most of the people who know, did you know that this is a step happening, and show like the large part of the community who was like, didn't know, to show that we need more awareness around that. Like people don't understand the effects they have by not voting. Like in the election last year, like we had like in Michigan alone, over 10,000 people who did not vote for a president. And they didn't know that a no vote was a vote for, anybody else that's voting against you. So your vote did count. You voted for everything else, but you didn't vote for a president. And that was like nationwide, where there were people that just didn't vote for a president because they didn't like either candidate. And I do understand that when it comes to politics, it's a really sticky subject. But in my opinion, like no one person is 100% like one particular area. No one person is 100% Democrat. No one person is 100% Republican. And I feel that we can come together to talk out these differences to create a society in which we all live in. So that kind of answers your question. But if you want to throw a book against my head and work, you can do that.
I was just wondering how the public can really get involved in the lawmaking process, so that it really reflects the needs of the public rather than just certain sections
we
of
can
society.
design policy.
Yeah,
We can actually design policy. Like, the Center for Urban Pedagogy in New York literally leads workshops and builds tools with communities to teach them how to design policies. Not necessarily like federal or like constitutional things, but like on local levels. They're part of the design process is modeling what a better alternative might look like, and then helping people to write policy that speaks to that vision. We can do that here.
Is like you now you start to hear where they say like don't mess with the gay community because they make changes, because a lot of laws and books that are in favor for the gay community, like that started from the ground level and went up. They made those changes. I always say the inappropriate phrase, but I think the disabled community or put in place all the laws
EDA.
around
Yeah, the ADA.
Yeah,
Yep.
you know, they created that so that they have appropriate parking spaces, you know, and appropriate bathrooms where they're not discriminated on. You know, when we talk about accessibility, like all those laws were created by those communities. That's why it's so easy for a blind person to go sue, you know, an organization for not making their website accessible, because they wrote those laws and those started from the ground up. So yeah, we can definitely do that. You know, you just got to get enough people with you, behind you in that effort to move and shape things up.
I would just say if people here have or know how to get others like us involved in those efforts, please share those, because I think there are people, and sometimes it feels like it's just hard to find them, right? Or you don't know who to talk to, or you don't know what website to go to. I mean, I don't know if you've been to a government website, but they're not always the greatest, right?
Share it in the meetup post for this meetup, or share it on the Facebook for STLX, and then everybody here can see it. But I'd just like to say, your government starts at the city level at your city council. You know, you can help design your government at your local level by attending city council meetings and by being vocal and active and voting.
Yeah, voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to help get people out to vote, I know AIGA right now nationally is accepting designs for getting people to register to vote, because it's such a huge issue. And in most states, most of the requirements to voting have changed, and it makes it a little bit harder for people to vote. And it's harder because what they're requiring for some of the different age groups, they don't have it. Some people have great grandmothers who can't find a birth certificate, and going back through history to try to find out, you know, the real birth date of people. Give you an excellent example. My grandma, she doesn't know her mama's name. Her mama was always called Big Mom. They never called her anything else. You know, my grandma's half Indian. She couldn't tell me her grandma's name. So we couldn't use anything right now today to really prove, you know, when she was born and by who. She definitely didn't know her father's name because her father wasn't in the picture. So there's a lot of that's happening in communities of color. And say if you had parents that came in from another country and had you here in the United States, but are not currently citizens, that also causes another issue, because now you're thinking about you being a citizen and having the correct information on you, and then also trying to get, you know, parents who might have became citizens later and getting their birth certificates and getting that verified across the line. In some states, they have laws now that state that to register to vote, you need a birth certificate, you know, or you know, and you think about somebody that haven't drove in 10 years, wouldn't have a driver's license because they take public transportation, especially in some of these areas where not having a car is a big part of the community. So San Francisco and New York, these areas, you know, they don't need cars because public transportation runs everywhere.
Usually you have to have some sort of state ID to even open a bank account. Not necessarily.
Yeah.
Does Social Security card count as state ID?
Not really,
yeah.
just for voting purposes.
And it's not federal, so
Each state has written their
each
law.
state has a different type of law, so there's no federal. I mean, you should be automatically registered. Let's be honest. Everybody should be able to vote whenever they need to. So, vote for that ability to be automatically registered is number one thing. The states make that rule. So if we all, you know, talk to Clerk McCaskill or start at the mayor, hey, we should make this a law for St. Louis, Missouri.
City council.
And the AIGA is creating this campaign, and if you get a poster in before the 30th, that poster will automatically be up in Times Square, New York. And so anybody that puts in, and basically it's just trying to get people to get out to vote. My poster is going to say, my ancestors couldn't vote, so I'm voting for them. So you should also vote for them to get out and register.
And we, you know, I think a lot of things is we have to vote against voter suppression techniques too. So if you find out somebody in your county or in your municipality or your city are doing those things, we need to bring that to light.
Well, I think that, and this is just a thought.
Yeah.
But we're talking, a lot of times when people think, I'm going to register to vote, they vote for one thing all 4 years of every 4 years, the president. and they don't vote for, and I'm guilty of this too,
elections.
the smaller things that could also impact that
Yes.
or impact their immediate community. So beyond saying, hey, let's register to vote, is the next thing that people are going to try to do to get people involved in their local communities elections, their state elections, their I can tell you I'm guilty of not even going to the local town hall meetings for the city of St. Louis, but I could probably guess a lot of the people in this room are guilty of that as well. And how do we fix that problem?
So one thing I think that's interesting to build upon your idea, you know, for the presidential election in 2016, there was an app where I could sign up. Because I wasn't working, I volunteered to take people to the polls, and even volunteered to be one of the people who went inside to get the pollster and escort people to the cars for car-side voting for people who have trouble voting, which is something that almost nobody knows about. Because I had a lady call me and say, well, I want to go vote, but I can't, like getting out of the car is so hard and stuff. I'm like, no problems, ma'am. I will get somebody to come take your vote right at the car. Like if for regular, not just, but we only organize those kind of things for presidential elections. So maybe that's where the design community could come up with a volunteerism app to not just get people to register, but to get them to the polls.
Or have absentee voting be easier. I mean, I vote absentee most of the time anyways because I hate waiting in line, and I'm registered in Potosi, so.
Or just the perception, like we do adoption and metrics and whatnot, but the problem might be people think that these smaller things don't matter. It's the one participation grade that matters, as opposed to the little things along the way that might influence that.
Or even have it being taught in schools, how, like, you know, have it part of your econ class, how to, you know, either vote, learn how to vote absentee, learn how to register to vote, where to register to vote. I mean, when I started voting, I had to register at the library. Now it's changed to now where you get your driver's license, they've made it. Most of the government offices of all sorts, now you can register to vote there.
Yeah, I think there could be a lot more awareness efforts around voting and how it plays out. Even showing the things that happen during the non-presidential elections that went into play that you didn't vote for, you know, and what that affect, I think will have monumental like effects where people see, wow, I didn't know like the school like got less money because I didn't vote, you know, or you know they put in this proposition this way, like a vote for, a vote yes is actually a vote no, different things like that. Like we could show like those strategies and things that are happening. Like I think just bringing that to light, a lot of things would take care of
Usable
itself.
ballot polls.
Usable ballot polls?
Yeah.
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 Accessibility.
Clear language. Yeah, I think it's a good.
Clear language is
Yeah.
key.
Yeah.
Because you're right, there are so many, and especially locally, it's like, it feels like they are purposefully wording these ballots to get the vote that people aren't actually naturally inclined to make.
And
So how do we do
policies get
that? What do we
stacked
do?
so that you get stopped at the library to sign something for one thing and it's stacked with another thing that you don't want. You might be for one, but not for the other.
And like small things that like could help. Like I've only one time seen during an election where I was in the mail sent a paper that like outlined, you know, what a yes vote went towards, what a no vote went towards, and what all these people were. Because most people don't even know the different people who are up for election, you know, which way they sway, the different things that they've had, you know, affected within the community, whether good or bad. You know, it would be just nice to receive something like that in the mail, and that's something simple that anybody can create. You know, so there's lots of different things that we can do in our community. What ends up happening is people having the available time because we get in the mode of working and trying to make a living, and that most times outweighs, you know, whether you participate in a local election or national election. Even the fact that most organizations don't offer time off for you to go and vote. I had that to happen recently where I asked the boss, and he was like, yeah, you can go do it, but you won't do it on the clock. You know, you can do
So
it.
that's against the law in Missouri? They actually legally have to give you, I believe it's up to 3 hours. Legally, they cannot penalize you, they cannot dock your pay.
But we're talking about contractors, so full-time employees.
Oh,
that's where the line.
Well,
yeah.
that's the problem, because right now, as we're moving towards that's a whole nother meetup.
Yeah.
We're moving towards a contractor society. They say it'll be 40% contract employment in 2020, and yet we have 0 laws to protect contractors.
We're hitting time.
Okay, so we're going to take the last question in the back, and then in there.
So I am currently in the banking industry where empathy is not at the top of mind of most. And that's the thing that's drawn me to UX. And this can be answered by Tim, of course, and anybody that's in this space. I'm wondering, while we're talking about racism and sexism and all these different things, do you feel like, for example, are microaggressions lesser in the UX space because people are more aware and should be more focused on how other people feel? Or is that just about the work? Or do you feel like people are a little more open to everybody in the UX industry?
I could probably say design in general, most of it is talked about a lot, and so we get circulated in our feeds. We're around people that talk about it and share it a lot. So that's what happened. Because the people that we're connected to, we see it a lot more. We're a lot more open to it because it's like constantly there. Like on my feeds and social media, I see it all the time. There's always someone talking about it. The problem I don't think would be like the design space is those who are not getting it or not seeing it or not allowing that dialogue to happen. Because if you don't follow anybody that opposed it, then you look at everybody that agrees with you. You know, give you an excellent example. During the election, there was a newspaper, I think it might have been Huffington Post, that showed the different sides and what they saw, you know, on Facebook. You know, and literally, like, I never thought that I'm following all people that thought just like me, that wouldn't oppose the way that I think. So, of course, you know, following a whole bunch of designers, most designers are Democratic, you know, and so they're all, you know, are open and, you know, oh, you know, let's try to fix the pay gap and let's be, you know, more sympathetic to these different issues. And, you know, I never saw this versus, you know, on the other side, you know, there's lots of issues that I didn't consider. I didn't consider ruralism versus, you know, urbanism, you know, which is like a big undertone theme within the election, you know. There's lots of things. So I think that's probably why the design industry is so open, because, you know, once it was brought to us, we all accepted it and continued to talk about it and have the conversation. Especially within our design conferences, and as diversity and inclusion become more prevalent, and it's leading, you know, the way within the industry.
So I just want to add to that. I can't really speak for the St. Louis area because I've been in Boston for the past 8 years, but I've been working as a UX designer. And microaggressions exist in every industry. UX is no different. The thing is, you know, we have to take the courage to bring up things that are bothering us, and our allies should take up the courage and listening to us and trying to hear us out and trying to create safe space for us. And that's a real thing. Like, no matter if someone's Democratic, no matter if they're an ally, my husband is white, no matter if he's married to a black woman, there's still things about microaggression that come up, and we have to take the courage to address it, to bring it up and continue the dialogue. That's how we grow, that's how we get better.
And then hitting microaggression is another huge issue altogether. So, thank you very much. I think this is really great dialogue. Don't let it stop here with me. And I hope you learned something tonight and able to take something and have more conversations with other people within the community.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is fabulous. And really, I see a lot of new faces here tonight. I hope we get to see you at other STLX meetups, get to know you better. And if you work for a company that would be willing to host a meetup, I would love to talk to you. We're trying to plan out the next year's worth of meetups. So please come talk to me. That's all.